Shavua Tov, everyone. Welcome to video number 109 in our TillesTells Stories of Saturday Night Group. I translated and freely adopted this story from Sapuri Hasidim, volume on the Torah. Subsequently, I included it in my second book, Festivals of the Full Moon, under Rosh Chodesh. I titled it Weight Watchers. Once a month, on the day preceding Rosh Chodesh, Rabbi Menachem-Mendel of Riminov, rabbi of the town, as well as one of the major Hasidic leaders of the early 1800s, was accustomed to send two rabbinical supervisors to make the rounds of every store to check the accuracy of their weights and measures once a month. Occasionally, he would delegate this task to his faithful and brilliant attendant, Rabbi Zvi Hirsch HaKohen. One time, Rabbi Zvi Hirsch, along with his partner, found an invalid measure in the store of a very wealthy man, who also had a background in Torah study and fancied himself to be somewhat of a scholar. When Rabbi Zvi Hirsch rebuked him about possessing such a measure, he replied coolly that it was of no consequence, because he didn't use this particular measure for buying or selling. Rabbi Zvi Hirsch quickly responded by quoting the Talmud, Baba Basra, that it is forbidden to maintain an inaccurate weight or measure in one's house, even if it is used only as a receptacle for urine. To this, the rich man quoted with disdain the verse, "Is also Saul among the prophets?" That's from the book of Samuel, book of Shmuel, book 1, chapter 10, verse 11. As if to say, does also Herschel rule on Jewish law? Condescendingly. Rabbi Zvi Hirsch remained silent. He simply took the measure in question and crushed it under his boot. By the way, if you look in Devarim, chapter 20, Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 13 to 16, which was in last week's Torah reading, Kitese, you'll see the importance the Torah attributes to sellers frequently checking the weights of their balance scales and all scales, their measures for length, fabrics, etc., and their containers for measuring liquid volume. When the emissaries returned to the Riminov, he asked Rabbi Zvi Hirsch if he found the weights and measures to be accurate. Rabbi Zvi Hirsch replied briefly, yes, everything is as it should be, concealing from the Rebbe what had happened in the shop of the wealthy merchant. He was concerned to prevent any suffering that might occur as a result of the Rebbe's focused disapproval of the man. And his was a real concern. After all, Rabbi Menachem-Mendel of Riminov was an important Rebbe in the third generation of Hasidism, and he was a main disciple of the Rebbe Rabbi Melech, and many Rebbes of the succeeding generation studied under him. But then, the Rebbe asked the other rabbi for a report, and he related the whole incident concerning the wealthy merchant. Immediately, the Rebbe summoned one of his other aides and ordered them to announce that at a certain hour, the Rebbe would be giving a special lesson in the synagogue and everyone should attend. He instructed him to knock on all the doors of the householders to inform them, except for the door of that particular rich man. All the community dutifully gathered in the shul, and the Riminov addressed them at length about the importance of the commandments of having and maintaining accurate weights and measures. Word quickly filtered out to the wealthy shopkeeper about what was taking place in the shul just then, with all in attendance except for him, and he became overcome with fright as he realized that the Rebbe was raising this furor solely on his account. He ran to the shul and immediately removed his shoes upon entering as a sign of submission and remorse, and begged Reb Mendel for forgiveness. The Rebbe agreed to forgive him, with the condition that he donate 50 gold coins to a worthy Jewish charitable cause. Interestingly, while the Rebbe was delivering his talk, and before the wealthy merchant arrived, people noticed that Reb Zvi Hirsch HaKohen's lips were moving unceasingly, although no one could overhear his words. After the incident was over, they asked him what he'd been saying. He replied that he'd been praying over and over that the shopkeeper would arrive in time to appease the Rebbe and avert punishment. The Riminov also added to the rich man, you belittled Rabbi Zvi Hirsch's attainment to Torah knowledge? I say to you, who knows if even the head of the heavenly yeshiva that you will attend after 120 years will be able to match him? It's no wonder that just before he passed away in 1815 on the 19th of Iyar, that among Rabbi Menachem-Mendel of Riminov's last words were to appoint as his successor not a family member, but his pure, faithful disciple and Meshorish, his attendant, Rabbi Zvi Hirsch HaKohen, who then became known in the Hasidic world as the Rebbe Reb Zvi Hirsch HaMeshorish, the Rebbe, the attendant. Over the next 3 decades until his passing in 1847 on the 29th of Heshvan, Rabbi Zvi Hirsch also acquired a reputation as a worker of miracles. Nevertheless, if I may add, our interest in him is not as a worker of miracles, but as a true master of forgiveness. And just as he was able to forgive and pray to benefit this wealthy man who had insulted him so egregiously, so we should be able to forgive all those who we need to forgive. And then the Chodesh Baruch Hu, the Creator, will certainly forgive us on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and we will all be inscribed for a good, healthy, and sweet Jewish year 5783.